Welcome to the Westport Library. Today's program will begin momentarily. Supported by Verso Studios, created locally and shared with the world.
Here's CBS News travel editor, Peter Greenberg.
Travel is the largest industry in the world. It employs 1 out of every 10 people. It is 10% of global GDP. That is staggering.
Peter Greenberg Worldwide is a multi-platform news and feature production company led by multi-Emmy Award-winning journalist, host, and producer Peter Greenberg.
This may look like a movie set, but it's actually one of 5 UNESCO World Heritage Sites inside Saudi Arabia.
The most recognizable on-air personality when it comes to travel and tourism.
Joining us now to explain the situation, travel expert extraordinaire, Peter Greenberg. Thank you very much. Happy Thanksgiving.
Right back at you.
I literally have been counting down the days to the time when we could do another interview about travel.
Exploration and breaking news.
What you probably don't see is the captain going in full reverse and still moving forward.
Peter Greenberg is back.
Greenberg is also the longtime travel editor for CBS News.
What's your idea of a dream vacation? If you had to pick something.
Where you sleep the best is where you think the best is, where you create the best, where you love the best. It's where you aspire to go back.
A New York Times best-selling author and a much sought-after speaker at business, consumer, and global industry conferences.
You come in at something we've lost the art of in this country. It's called the art of the conversation.
And these conversations literally span the globe, starting with The Royal Tour, a series of 1-hour global specials where sitting heads of state become Peter's singular tour guide to their countries.
Ready to go? I'm ready to go.
Greenberg is the ultimate statesman and journalist, providing an authentic, credible voice and access to extraordinary locations, historic landmarks, and unforgettable cultural experiences.
Now my question to you, sir, is,
yes?
We got to go down.
Good evening, folks. Mike Boyle with the Wise Men of Westport-Weston. Welcome to the library. Bill Harmer's here this evening as well, and we have Robin is in the back with Talk Tours, Peter Greenberg tonight, and I'm going to be introducing Allen Swerdlowe, who's a good friend of his, and I'm going to read that. But I wanted to mention, please turn off your phones if you have them. I know I've got hearing aids, so if I don't turn off my phone, it still rings in my ears. And the people next door to me noticed that. We have a table in the back. I'd love to welcome you to the Wise Men and any the retired or semi-retired men in town. If you're not a member, feel free to join us. And I'd like to introduce Allen. I'm going to read it because I didn't know everything he wanted me to say. Allen's going to introduce Peter Greenberg, and he's going to be doing that by reflecting on the genius of Peter's career and their work at the Daily Cardinal, which was the student newspaper in Madison during the turbulent 1960s. Allen is one of our members, and he's an architect, educator, and passionate world traveler whose journeys have taken him across 4 continents, 73 countries, and numerous states, and he's interested in design, history, and architecture. With a deep curiosity and a keen eye for detail, he has explored everything from ancient architecture to modern urban environments. Allen has also written and produced a travel documentary which aired on the Discovery Channel and in Ireland during, it's set in Ireland during World War II. Most recently, his work with the Fulbright Foundation has taken him to Uzbekistan and India, where he collaborated with university students, local officials, and business leaders. So please join me in welcoming Allen.
Okay, so I'd like to first of all thank the people who sponsored this event, including the Westport Library, Alex Giannani, E.J. Crawford, the Wise Men of Westport-Weston, Art Mann and Dick Colt spent many hours on this program, and Robin Tauk. Now let's rewind the tape 60 years and spend a moment reflecting on the roots of Peter's career in journalism. So, I guess you can all recognize Peter. He had a bit of a long hair in the 1960s. But I'm actually in there too. I actually had hair in the 1960s. So Peter and I share two things in common. We attended the University of Wisconsin in Madison in the 1960s. Yes, that's Peter with me and some other Daily Cardinal staffers. And we both wrote and edited for the Cardinal, the official university newspaper, which had a newsroom, complete printing plant, photo lab, and several editorial rooms, all in one basement office. While the union printers were professionals, the student staff of more than 20 unpaid volunteers who wrote, edited, photographed, did layout design, and even typeset articles for production with both Peter and I can trace our current work back using a straight line from the lessons we learned at the Cardinal to the professional work we do today. As teenagers, we covered both local and national news with a daily circulation of more than 20,000 copies, many times getting news out before the two city newspapers. In this case, the tragic headline on the right, King Murdered, something that I actually set with my own hands from the type in the typesetting area of the printing press. And periodically, we issued special editions, including student orientation, a political paper, and a cultural magazine. At the time, Wisconsin was the most active and violent anti-war campus in America, which often found the National Guard surrounding the school. And our lives changed. We weren't just teenage students. We had become front-page news in the war at home, protesting American involvement in Vietnam. Peter wrote many front-page articles that we now would refer to as breaking news. As you can see, he's sharing the byline with another one of our editors, while I wrote editorials about the same on the inside pages. We, as a group, periodically reunited, as in 2018 for the Madison Reunion Conference, with 32 talks over 4 days, and concluding with 6 former editors, talking about the Daily Cardinal's influence on the university and its community. On the stage is Stephen Reiner, who was a 60 Minutes producer and executive director of NPR's All Things Considered, myself, legal analyst Rena Steinzer, Walt Bodanich from the New York Times, who won 3 Pulitzer Prizes, Jeff Greenfield, RFK speechwriter, political analyst for CBS, ABC, and CNN, who won 5 Emmys, and Peter himself. And since the focus of the then mainstream media was on American colleges in revolt, it wasn't long before Peter was hired by Newsweek to cover the revolution. And soon he was covering everything else as the West Coast correspondent for Newsweek, ranging from Watergate to Patty Hearst, from Howard Hughes and Gary Gilmore to Bette Midler and Bruce Springsteen, and from Nixon to airline safety, shown here with King Abdullah II of Jordan. And then one story he wrote became the foundation for the most dramatic movie produced for CBS on the life and suicide death of comedian Freddie Prinze, followed by other movies based on his stories, including deadly Air Force games in the desert above Nevada, a trailblazing and controversial expose on TV ministers, as well as being present at many meritorious events, such as the mall attack in Nairobi in 2013. Peter became the head of dramatic television at Paramount, running the team that produced MacGyver and later at MGM 30-something. But he never stopped being a journalist who traveled the world, meeting many world leaders, including the president of Tanzania, as shown here. In 1988, he was tapped as travel correspondent for Good Morning America. 7 years later, NBC scooped him up, and he became the travel editor for NBC. 2009, he moved to CBS as travel editor, where he continues to report across all the network's platforms. Here he's with the president of Rwanda. His national CBS News radio show, Eye on Travel, now in its 28th season, continues to be broadcast weekly from different worldwide locations. Peter with the Prime Minister of Poland, with Benjamin Netanyahu, the Prime Minister of Israel, in Belize. Last week he was reporting from Costa Rica. Tomorrow he leaves for Rome and Romania. He's been, obviously from this slide, in the Galapagos Islands, in Antarctica, but tonight he's with us in Westport at Campo Beach, no, actually Saudi Arabia. And so, looks like Campo. So let's give a warm welcome to Peter Greenberg.
Well, I'm feeling old. Good evening, everybody. And first of all, a big thanks to everybody here at the Westport Library, to Robin Tauk, my old buddy, who actually, her plane was delayed, so she actually can stay in the back of the room for 20 more minutes. What a surprise, someone's plane that was delayed. At least it will take off, I hope. Thank you so much for having me. And based on all the conversations I've had earlier this evening, I'm gonna start with a presumption that you guys are a well-traveled audience. Am I right? Yes? Do you have passports? Consider yourself in the distinct minority. Only 41% of Americans have passports. Think about that. How embarrassing is that? But tonight, for those of you who do have passports, I'm assuming you use them. Good. So I'm not worried about if you're gonna travel or when you're gonna travel. What we're gonna talk about tonight, and I'll be happy to answer some questions a little bit later, of course, is how you're gonna travel and then where you're gonna travel. It's amazing to me when you think about it, but travel and tourism is the largest industry in the world. It still is. And yet, it's the first thing that gets cut off. It's also the first thing that bounces back. And the real question, of course, is everybody here, how many people here look at themselves as tourists? Anybody? One hand, one very brave hand. Good, because my definition of tourist is victim waiting to happen. My definition of traveler is a tourist who's been victimized and basically will not do that again. So I welcome all the travelers here tonight, and we're gonna try to navigate some uncharted waters because as much as we love to travel, we get abused. We get abused, I've figured out there are about 47 different points of abuse that are waiting for you from the time you make your reservation till the time you struggle back home hoping that your bags are on the same flight that you were. And we're not gonna do all 47 tonight, but I'm gonna try to dispel a few myths and help you through it so you can make that decision in an intelligent and confident way about not only where you wanna go, but how you wanna get there. Remember, the first, or I should say the worst, four-letter word that starts with F when it comes to travel is fear. And we're gonna get to that too. But let's start with just the basics. How many people here make your reservations online? A lot of hands, okay. Everybody who just raised their hand is a loser. Now, would you like to know why you're losers? If you don't wanna know why you're losers, you're really losers. Do you wanna know why you're losers? Okay. The reason is because I know why you do it. It's convenient, it's expedient. You could do it at 2 o'clock in the morning in your bathrobe. God forbid you don't have to talk to anybody. And then you hit a keystroke at 2:30 in the morning and think you've done a really good job. You haven't. What you're seeing on your screen is not even half the inventory. It's only what they want you to see. And therefore, you're disadvantaging yourself every time you go online to make a reservation. That applies to whether it's an airline, a hotel, a cruise ship, doesn't matter. I'm not telling you not to go online to research, but it's important for you to find a human being, to talk to them, to answer your questions. Because every time you go through that step of making a reservation online, you're setting the standards for what? A screw up. And then you have nobody to talk to. And today, think about it. We're living in a world where the airlines have become an oligopoly. They don't care. If the airlines were telling the truth about their branding, it would be, we're not happy until you're not happy. And you've flown those airlines, I know you have. So think about how you make those reservations and then where you want to go and how you want to get there. Because if you don't, you are a victim waiting to happen. And we all love to travel, but every day we are confronted with that four-letter word that starts with F. How many people here have heard of State Department advisories? You all have. That three-word sentence is such a negative connotation. How many of you have actually read one? Really read one? I'm going to give you a little bit of history about how we came to State Department advisories. Up until 1988, there were State Department advisories, but they were not universally or unilaterally enforced or applied. I mean, there were always State Department advisories about the Middle East, but Northern Ireland was getting blown up every day, and they didn't have one. It was selectively applied. And the reason why I mentioned 1988 is that's when everything changed. The people in this room are old enough to remember December 21st, 1988. That was Lockerbie, Pan Am 103. When a little bit after 6:30 in the evening, a Pan Am 747 at 31,000 feet was blown up over the skies of Scotland. And I covered that story. I was there. And I'd actually been on that plane the day before. So I had a personal interest in finding out what really happened. And what I found out, which we then reported, I was then at ABC, was that the US Embassy in Helsinki had received the most credible information 4 days before that bombing, that they were going to take out a US flag carrier coming from London within the next 5 days before Christmas. What did the embassy do with that information? They only shared it with other embassy personnel. Last time I looked, they represented us, and they never told us. And 259 people on the plane and 11 on the ground were killed. And when that story hit the press, because I reported it, the US State Department went nuts, and they started issuing a State Department advisory for everything, right? If an American tore a fingernail in Peru, it became a State Department advisory. People here understand the concept of CYA. That's what it was. But that negative connotation of the word State Department advisory meant people wouldn't go. Now, if there's a riot in Cincinnati, why can't I go to Cleveland? We were painting with a very broad brush, and people stopped traveling. Now, for those of you who've never read a State Department advisory, let me give you one. Here's the State Department advisory for Turkey. Americans are warned that Turkish drivers pass on the left and the right. Have they been on I-95? I mean, is that going to stop you from going to Turkey? For a lot of people, it did. The State Department advisory for Indonesia. Americans are warned to stay away from large crowds and avoid buses. I live in LA. I stay away from buses all the time because for those people who know Los Angeles, I have no idea where the buses go. That's terrorism. I'll get on one, I'll never come back. But the point is, it was directly involved with what? Shaping our travel patterns based on fear. Now then something else happened. And that is in the first term of the Trump administration, they realized that this is maybe not such a good idea. They came up with another idea, which was also not so good. They decided to issue a State Department advisory for every single country in the world. And they did it over 4 levels. So I'll walk them through for you so you know. And by the way, this is a little absurd. Level 1, travel with normal caution. To me, normal caution means don't trip and fall, right? Level 2, travel with increased caution. At this point, most Americans are putting plywood on their windows, right? Level 3, reconsider travel. Now you're in the safe room in the basement. And level 4 says, do not travel. At this point, you're a hostage. You know, it's crazy. But these are not regulations. They're not rules. They're not laws. And as a result, people think they are, and they don't go. And this is crazy. Of 193 countries that are on record at the United Nations, there are only about 5 places I wouldn't go. That leaves 188 I would. And you can. And yet, most people are saying, oh no, there's a State Department advisory. And they say it just like that, by the way. There's a State Department advisory. What I suggest that you all do is, first of all, read them. You should read them. But then get the advisories given out by the British Foreign Office to their citizens. They do a better job. And then, with very few exceptions, there is not a country in the world of significance that doesn't have an English language newspaper that's either a weekly or a daily. You can access it online, read the last 30 days of issues, and you'll be able to make an informed, intelligent choice as to whether you're going to go or where in that country you're going to go. It's really as simple as that. So that really opens up your choices. But even that doesn't help you when you're going back to try to make that reservation. Because what are you paying for? How are they setting the prices, right? How many times have you gone online to see only 2 rooms left, only 1 seat left? And in a panic, you get it, right? No, what it really means is, and that's a lie, by the way, because what it really means is there's only 1 seat left in the allocation that Expedia got from the travel provider. That doesn't mean that's all the seats there are. There could be so many empty seats on that plane, you can go bowling on the plane. But you didn't know that, right? Then there's the issue of the most misleading aspect of travel, or one of them at least, travel insurance. How many people understand travel insurance? A rhetorical question. Not only that, if you go online, you can't complete the transaction unless you either opt in or opt out of the insurance that you don't even know what it is, right? It says, oh, you'll get peace of mind. No, that's actually a piece of crap. Because there are so many exclusions that you don't know about because it doesn't show up on the first page of the website. In fact, you have to go to page 5 to find out all the things that you no longer qualify for, which means you just bought worthless insurance. How many people have seen that on your screens? You have to see it if you're going online. Opt out. Buy that insurance from a travel advisor or a travel agent who can walk you through the hieroglyphics of what's in there, because what's worse than not knowing what you're covered for is not knowing what you're not covered for. And then there's the pricing itself. We are now in the brave new world of artificial intelligence and an algorithm parade that's downright scary. Delta Airlines a few weeks ago actually boasted at an investors conference a statement they later learned to regret when I wrote about it, that they're coming up with a new wave of something called personalized pricing. Did anybody see that story? Let me tell you what that means. You know, they know more about you than you think they know, right? How many people here are a member of a frequent flyer program? Okay, well, they know who you are. So anytime you go to make that reservation, what are you giving them? Your date of birth, your frequent flyer number, and that triggers in their system your entire travel history. So they know if you went somewhere on a Wednesday, probably you're a business traveler. You'll pay more. Or if you went somewhere last year with your wife and you're going to that same place this year with your wife, you gotta go, and you'll pay more. They're even able to scrub outside third-party data to increase the price if they find out you're going to a funeral. So there's no such thing anymore, if this goes to fruition, of a base price. We're all flying blind. And it raises a lot of data privacy issues, some transparency issues along the way, but that's what's coming, right? I'll give you an example of what happened to me a couple of years ago before AI was really moving fast. I live both in Los Angeles and New York. I commute on the transcons because I'm coming back to do the show. And it was a Sunday night, and I wanted to know what the price of the ticket was going to be to go on either a Tuesday or a Wednesday from Los Angeles to New York round trip. So I went online to research the prices, and I came up with a price of $428, which was pretty good since I was only booking 2 days in advance. But I wouldn't know if I was going on a Tuesday or Wednesday until New York came to work the next morning, and they're 3 hours earlier than me, or 3 hours later than me. So I woke up at about 7 in the morning, called New York and found out it was going to be on a Tuesday. I went back online, and the fare had jumped to $478, a $50 difference. So I called the airline and asked them to explain how they did that. You know what their answer was? The transcon's a very popular route. We live with a law of supply and demand, and therefore that justifies the increase in the rate. And I took them at their word, but I wasn't done yet. I went back online that night and looked at a fare for 4 months away on a Wednesday at 11 o'clock in the morning from LaGuardia to Des Moines, Iowa. And I got a fare of $228. I waited 2 hours, went back online, it was $288. Now, nobody could make the argument to me at that moment that there were 50,000 deranged travelers at 2 o'clock in the morning who wanted to fly 4 months later on 11 o'clock on a flight on a Wednesday between New York and Des Moines. So what was the lesson I learned from that I want to share with you? If you're going to go online and research a fare and you want to go back, either use somebody else's computer or clean out your cookies, because they know it's you. They already have figured out your interest, and they price it accordingly. And this is not just airlines, this is rental cars, this is cruise lines, this is hotels. And so we're now sort of uniformly victimized by pricing strategies over which we have no control, because we have a government that will not make a legal case against predatory pricing, or what they call surveillance pricing, or as Delta likes to say, personalized pricing. Now, a funny thing that came out of that story that I wrote, Delta immediately said, oh, we never said it. Well, they said it to all the investors. It's recorded. They said, what we really meant to say is, we're thinking about it, but we haven't done it, comma, yet. So it's coming. So the key to being a successful traveler is about 3 different things. 1, never take a no from somebody who's not empowered to give you a yes in the first place. 2, understand, it's like Gorbachev and Reagan, trust but verify, because it changes by the hour. And 3, I mentioned it earlier in the reel that you saw, you need to have a conversation. That's how you find the person who can give you a yes. Because otherwise, again, we are victims waiting to happen. Now, having said all that, we still love to travel, right? Right? Okay, good. So I'm worried about you. So then the question becomes, how are we going to do it? All right? Let's assume you finally got a ticket price that you like. Okay. But did they disclose all the fees you were going to pay? Right? Because the airlines today make more money from ancillary fees than they make from the ticket. How much money did the airlines make last year from ancillary fees? I'm talking checked bags, food, all those other things they charge you for. Anyone want to guess? Correct, 34 billion, right? That's more than the market cap of all the airlines combined. How much do they make from fares? Not that much. So you need to get them to fully disclose what they're charging. And the same thing applies to hotels. How many people here live to pay a resort fee? How many people paid it? Come on, you did. Why? Did they disclose it when you made the reservation? Chances are they didn't. Did they disclose it when you checked in? Chances are they didn't. It was sticker shock when you checked out and they already had your credit card on file. And what did you find out? It was $50 a day. That's for a 5-night stay. That's $250 you didn't budget for, nor did it cover anything that's remotely relatable to your lifestyle. I was checking into a hotel in San Juan. We name names on my show, so I'll name it here. It was the Sheraton. And when I went in to check in, I'm at the front desk, and the front desk clerk says, oh, here's your complimentary cocktail. I said, can I ask you a question? Is that part of a resort fee? Yeah. Really, what does that resort fee include? Oh, by the way, the resort fee was $80 a day. What does that resort fee include? A free yoga lesson. I said, let me tell you what I'm going to be doing while doing Downward Dog. I'm going to be asking myself the question, why am I paying you $80 a day? And in fact, you're going to take it off my bill. You want to know something other that's crazy about bills? I was checking into a hotel called The Point in Phoenix. And I only came in with a carry-on bag. I believe there are only 2 kinds of airline bags, carry-on and lost. Are you with me? Okay. And I was only going to be there one night. I was there to, this is the fun part, I was there to give a speech to the Hotel Innkeepers of America, all the owners. And so when I checked in and got my room, I noticed the bellman there. His name was Manny. We said hi, but I didn't need him. I go to my room, go to bed. The next morning, the bill's under my door, and I'm speaking at 8:30 that morning. So at 6 o'clock in the morning, the bill's under my door. There it is, the room, the tax, and another charge. What was the charge? A $10 mandatory tip to bellman. Manny was still working. He was like working midnight to 8. So I called him on the phone. I said, Manny, what is this? He said, yeah, I know. I said, do you at least get the money? He said, no. I said, really? What are you doing at 8:30, Manny? He said, nothing. I said, great, you're my guest at the speech. And I brought him in, and oh yeah. And I told that story, and while in the midst of that story, and by the way, all these hotel owners were gonna be there for 2 more days. They hadn't seen their bill yet. And all of a sudden, in the back of the room, there was a guy frantically waving his hand. And I said, yes, sir. He said, well, I'm the general manager. I'll be glad to take it off your bill. And I said, actually, that won't work. You're gonna have to take it off everybody's bill. And he said, well, I can't do that. I said, no problem, leave it on my bill. He said, why? I said, what are you doing tomorrow morning at 8:30 tomorrow morning? He said, why? I said, I'm gonna be on the show. I'm gonna be holding up your bill. And we did. And that's the point. At least I have the forum to do it, but you have the forum to do it as well. You get to vote with your wallet. If they don't disclose the charge, you can dispute it. Now, by the way, I have no problem with any hotel making a profit. That's why they're in business. I do have a problem with lack of transparency and failure to disclose. And that's so much a part of the travel experience these days. It happens in every single way that we do it, right? Now, here's the craziest part. And this is one that drives me the most nuts. And by the time I finish telling you this, you might get nuts as well. How many of you are members of a frequent flyer program? How many of you are members of more than one? All right, thank you for your loyalty. Okay. Do you know how many members there are of frequent flyer programs in America? 384 million, that's more than the population of this country. Everybody is chasing miles. And they're chasing miles they can never redeem. It's the worst form of addiction when it comes to travel. So we did a little research, and we found out that airlines don't make money from flying airlines. They make money from frequent flyer programs. In fact, they make more money from the frequent flyer programs than they make as airlines. It's crazy. Every year, American Express writes a check to Delta Airlines, their partner, for $10 billion. To do what? To buy miles that they then give you that you can't redeem. Let's think about this. Chase writes a check for $10 billion every year to United for the same thing, and Citibank does it for American. The airlines are selling miles to these credit card companies that will then give you a mile per dollar spent, knowing full well when they sell the miles to the banks, and the banks know when they give you the miles for your purchases, they have no intention of redeeming. How many, as a percentage of available miles out there, are actually ever redeemed? It's 8%. If I said to anybody in this room, give me all your money, put it in my bank, and you have an 8% chance of getting it back, would you do it? But you do it with your frequent flyer programs. Now, here's the crazy part when you really run the numbers. Only 49% of Americans pay their credit card bills in full every month. And the average credit card interest is 25%, compounded. So you have an entire population chasing miles they can't get, paying 25% interest on the stuff they bought to get the miles. And by the time they're ever able to redeem the miles, assuming they don't change the redemption levels, which everybody in this room knows they do by the hour, it's worthless. And yet it cost them $14,000 to $18,000 for a supposed free ticket. Are you excited about your miles now? So how do you get around that? I'm not doing anybody any favors in this room if I tell you a problem and I don't tell you the solution. The solution is frequent flyer accounts are not bank accounts. They accrue no interest. They get devalued by the hour. How many people here have a bucket list? Come on, you can raise your hand. I'm not going to bite it. Okay, burn the bucket list. Because I know it's on the bucket list. What's the #1 destination for Americans? Paris. Why? You're a bunch of failed art history majors. You studied the painting in school, you gotta go see it once, you stand in line for 9 hours at the Louvre, you come back an hour later going, it's so small. Who did that? Come on, you did it. So burn the bucket list and then pick a place that none of your friends wanna go. And go there, use your miles for that. Don't use it for Hawaii, don't use it for Paris, for Barcelona, for London. You're not gonna get the miles, you're not gonna get the redemptions. Because every time you leave that in there, it goes away. Now let me run the math for you another way, and this ought to hit home. 54% of all mileage earned is earned on the ground with credit card purchases. It's great for the banks. It's great for the airlines. If the airlines did not have that income from the banks, they would be Chapter 7 in 2 weeks. That's how important that mileage is to them, which they don't redeem, right? Okay, let's think about that 54%. Not long ago, I wanted to go from New York to Copenhagen. And by the way, there are only about 5 people in the world that have more miles than I do. It doesn't matter. I can stand up here all night long and brag, but I can't redeem them either. So I called Delta. By the way, that stands for Don't Ever Leave the Airport. And by the way, I have them for all airlines if you're interested. And I called them up and I said, do you have any frequent flyer miles available in coach from New York to Copenhagen? Anytime in my lifetime? No. How about Comfort Plus? By the way, Comfort Plus means they only defer the orthopedic surgery. No. How about business? No. They had 1 seat available in Delta One. Who wants to guess how many miles they wanted? Who said 200,000? Who said that? Okay, you're not going to the Showcase Showdown. You ready? 750,000. Now wait, if I'd been stupid enough to redeem 750,000 miles for that 1 first-class ticket, that's the dollar equivalent of me having spent $405,000. For $405,000, I can take the first 2 rows on a G5 to Copenhagen. But I'm not going to take you. But you understand now the value of those miles is equivalent to Venezuelan currency. And yet that's what we're all chasing. So the airlines are addicted to it because they're making so much money from the banks. The banks love it because they're making so much money on the interest. We get nothing. So if you've got miles sitting around, don't let them sit. Pick a place, even Des Moines. Des Moines has a lot to offer. But seriously, don't let them sit. Redeem them. You with me on that? Okay. We'll turn this into a revival meeting sooner or later. But now there comes a point where we have to get very serious and talk about something that's been in the news a lot lately, something that I've covered for over 40 years. Actually, I take that back, 50 years. There has not been an aviation accident or disaster that I wasn't the primary reporter on since 1975. And I can tell you that the problems that you're hearing about with the FAA are not new. They were there back in 1975, and they're there today. And something that needs to be changed immediately. And the only way it can be changed is by congressional action. Because when the FAA was established as an agency back in 1935, as an act of Congress, they were given a dual but schizophrenic mandate, an impossible mandate to do. The first part of the mandate, which we can all appreciate, is to enact and enforce safety. We can all get behind that. But the second part gets messy. They were also empowered to what? Promote the business of aviation. You cannot do both. They lost sight of who they served. They think the airlines and the manufacturers are their clients. They're not. We are. And every time the FAA is confronted with a problem for which there's a solution and it's safety related, they either slow walk it or ignore it because of intense lobbying from the manufacturers or the airlines. That's not serving the public. We all saw what happened earlier this year with that collision over Reagan Airport in Washington, a story that I covered. And we knew right away. I went on the air immediately talking about helicopter incursions, lack of staffing in the control tower, and worse. That's still happening today. Of the 113 air traffic control centers in America, 111, as I'm speaking to you tonight, are understaffed. That's not good. Because what that means is they're forcing the controllers who work there to work mandatory overtime. The one job in the world you never want anybody to work overtime. But it's more than a control issue. It's a maintenance issue. It's an oversight issue. When we were doing the story about the Boeing 737 MAX, you may remember that, something came up that I'd already covered 20, 30, and 40 years ago, and it never got any action, and that's this. Boeing, and at one point McDonnell Douglas and Lockheed and Convair, all the then manufacturers in the United States, basically they had to have their work inspected by an FAA designated inspector. We're talking the assembly line, to make sure things were done right. Here's the problem. Those designated inspectors were on the payroll of Boeing. Anybody have a problem with that? Talk about a conflict of interest. You're going to stop the production line and put your job in jeopardy to point out a problem? That was not the culture. And that's exactly what was happening at the Boeing assembly line in 70, 80, 90, 2000, and then again, of course, when we had the terrible 737 MAX crashes in Ethiopia and Indonesia. And finally, when we brought that story out, and by the way, you know how it got traction? Not with me on CBS News. I did it with John Oliver. That's where people get their news these days. And Congress took action. They passed a rule that forbid Boeing from inspecting their own work. Pretty good, right? No. 2 months ago, they gave them an exemption. They're back now inspecting their own work. This is wrong. Look, I'll give you the good news and the tough news. The good news is we've just celebrated the safest 30 years in commercial aviation since aviation began. That's pretty good. We really can't improve on that batting average. It's so good, right? But that's not the issue. The issue is not whether or not you can improve on that. The issue is, can you maintain it? And when you have stories like this, and by the way, there are so many others, the answer is sadly, probably not. And that's the environment that we're in right now. We have an anti-regulatory stance from the current administration that is not dealing with the problem. The FAA just announced yesterday, very proudly, I understand why, that they met their hiring goal of hiring 2,000 new controllers. Good for them. Here's what they didn't tell you. The washout rate is 30%, so they only basically hired 1,400. And it takes 2 to 3 years to get somebody behind a console to be able to operate as an air traffic controller. It's an intense job. So our problems don't get anywhere near solved in 3 years. Plus, what's the attrition rate of the guys who are retiring now? Have they planned for that? They haven't. That's the first thing. The second thing is, the FAA announced they were asking, listen to what I'm saying, asking the airlines to reevaluate their emergency evacuation procedures. Wait a second. How many people have been on a plane lately? In coach? Okay. Do you know that the FAA requires airlines to comply with the following rule? Now think about this. That you have to be able to demonstrate that you can evacuate a fully loaded plane in the dark with half the exits blocked in less than 90 seconds. And every year, up until about 3 years ago, every airline passed the test with flying colors. You know why? They got to pick who did the test. They hired the cast of Cirque du Soleil. Sort of. Guess what happened? It got worse. 3 years ago, the airlines went to the FAA and said, could we have permission to do the test on computer? And they're still passing the test. Every evacuation I've seen, with the exception of one, which I can talk about, in the last 20 years, took a minimum of 9 minutes. And people die from toxic fumes and smoke, or the fire itself. Unacceptable. Why is it taking so long? Because the airlines have crammed so many seats in coach, right? And there's no accountability for infirmity, disability, downright fear, idiots taking their carry-on bags off the plane with them, right? We've seen all that. So every time I get on a plane, I'm going, you schmuck, it'll be your plane, and then you still haven't been able to have them change the rules. In 2018, Congress ordered the FAA, ordered them to come up with a new standard set of seating to allow for safe evacuation. And what did the FAA do? They ignored it. They still haven't done it. This is not acting in the public interest. So the good news is we have a very safe environment, and we have the makings and the recipe of a disaster. Everybody here votes. You have elected representatives. They fly. We're all on the same plane together on this one. We need to change the FAA. It's as simple as that. It can't be that difficult, right? Because the solution is simple. Every time there's an airplane accident, the NTSB investigates. These are the heroes. These are the folks who do the most unbelievable jobs in the most adverse conditions. And I've been literally in the trenches and the swamps with them at accident sites, watching them do their work. Whether it was the ValueJet crash in the Everglades, the Concorde in Paris in 2000, and many, many others. What's their job? Their job is to determine the probable cause. And then they have to make a recommendation. They're not a regulatory agency. They have to make a recommendation to who? The FAA. Do you know, and by the way, this is publicly accessible information, every year the NTSB publishes its own 10 most wanted list, recommendations they've made to the FAA that were ignored. It's another federal agency mad at another federal agency. But these are the guys who know what they're doing. For example, if I'm holding this pen with 2 fingers, and for reasons I can't understand at this moment, the pen drops and everybody dies, now the NTSB comes and investigates. They're gonna find out, how did that happen? And guess what? In the course of their investigation, they find out, you know what was missing? You really needed 3 fingers. Now, is the 3rd finger available? It is. Can we implement it? We can. Make an urgent safety recommendation that from now on, all pens have to be held by 3 fingers. And what does the FAA do? They want to study it. They're allowed to do that. And they studied it, and then come back and say, too expensive. Because they're worried about the cost impact of their clients. You can't put a price tag on safety. They do it all the time. You know, we did a story once on NBC, and I did it again on CBS because we actually had the videotape to prove it, of survivable crashes, right? Hard G landings or aborted takeoffs that people could survive. How many people here have young children or young grandchildren? You're still allowed to board that plane and hold that child under the age of 2 in your lap. Lap kids, they're the first to die because the physics makes it impossible for you to hold on to your kid, and they become missiles. And we saw in so many cases, and the NTSB made so many recommendations, and they went into their own testing labs and got baby crash test dummies and recreated those crashes or those hard landings, and sure enough, same result. So they made an urgent safety recommendation, you want to know which year? 23 years ago, to the FAA saying, any kid under the age of 2 should either have a rear-facing restraint, a forward-facing restraint, or based on the weight of the kid, their own seat. And you know what the FAA did? They want to study it. So they took 90 days, they're allowed 90 days to study it, and on the 89th day, they actually came out with this statement. Because they went to their own testing labs in New Jersey, got their own baby crash test dummies, did the exact same tests, guess what? Exact same results. So their statement said this: we understand the problem, we believe parents should be responsible, and provide their own restraint systems for kids. Because if we ask the airlines to do this, they'll only raise fares, and people who would otherwise fly will drive and be killed on the highway. And I went on the air and said, when I want the FAA to talk about highway safety, I'll ask them. By the way, they've never changed the rule. It's still allowable today. So every time you see a parent with a young child under 2, they are at serious risk. These are the challenges that can be solved by everybody in this room with the right pressure against Congress, because it's not red state, blue state stuff. It's human stuff. It's science. It's an inevitability waiting to happen if we don't. So those are some of the stories that I cover on a day-to-day basis, whether it's cruise ship safety, airline safety, hotel fire safety. Here's a question. When you make a hotel reservation, what's your favorite room? A room with a view? Okay. Who said yeah? Okay. There's not a fire department in the world that can safely and effectively fight a fire above the 6th floor. So if you want a room with a view on the 12th or 14th or the 18th floor, you're gonna have a great view of the fire department being unable to reach you. You want a floor between 2 and 6. Not 1, that's a crime floor, right? It is. It's about accessibility. 2 to 6, right? But here's another one for you. When you make a hotel reservation and you do it online, you can't ask any questions about your room. They show you a wide-angle photograph that looks like you can fit the entire state of Connecticut in your room, and you base it on that alone, and you get there, and it's not pleasant. You need to have those conversations, right? What do you want to be able to ask before you ever get there? Can you tell me how close my room is to the construction? Every hotel is in a different cycle. of restoration or renovation? And if you don't ask that question, you'll be given the keys to the jackhammer suite. How close is my room above the ballroom? It may be quiet during the day, but at 2 o'clock in the morning, they're throwing out the wine bottles from the Schmidlap wedding. And here's one that nobody ever thinks about, but I'm gonna help you. How many people like great water pressure in your shower? Everybody, right? How do you get it? There's not a single hotel that can maintain consistently great and powerful water pressure in the hotel. So what do? On different floors, not alternating floors, but different floors, they put in booster pumps. So when you check into the hotel, and there you are with the front desk clerk about to get your key, before you get your key, say, could you do me a favor? Could you just call down to engineering and ask them what floor the booster pumps are on? Now, they will look at you like deer in the headlights, but they'll make the call, and they'll say, oh, it's on 2, 5, and 7. Say, great, I'll take a room on floor 5. Now they give you the key, you walk into your room, you open the door to the bathroom, you turn the faucet on, it's a fire hose. It's great. These are things that are important to me. Same thing with lighting. People who design hotel rooms have never stayed in one. How many people, it's true, right? They're either too dark, right? By the way, I judge a hotel room by the bathroom, because you spend more waking hours in your bathroom than any other room in the hotel. Now, there's either not enough light in there for your makeup, or, let's be honest, there's not enough shelf space in there for all the crap women take with them. They have search and rescue teams trying to figure out what's in my wife's bag, I'm telling you. So that's the lighting issue, right? And then these designers think all you want in your main bedroom is mood lighting. You know, we don't change our lifestyle when we change our location. That's very important to know. It's true. You know what? I like to read in my room. What a concept. I like to think in my room. I like to work in my room. I can't do it with a 30-watt bulb, right? So these are the questions you need to ask before you ever get there, and you can't do that online. Same thing with the resort fee, right? It's all negotiable. They don't want to tell you that, but it is. Because hotels don't make money when you stay once. They make money when you stay more than once and tell all your friends. And that's all the things you need to do and the questions you need to ask, and we're just getting started, right? Same thing with cruise ships. How many people, when they go on a cruise, want a balcony? Everybody. Have you seen the size of those balconies in the catalog? Again, the state of Connecticut's out there looking at the waves. In real life, you need an industrial strength spatula to get on the balcony. And what's the point of the balcony then? You can't really be out there, right? It looks good in the photo. You know why? Have you ever seen a cruise ship brochure? They're all the same. It's always the senior couple clinking the wine glasses, right? They're all alcoholics. You don't need an outside balcony. How many people here get seasick? Anybody? Oh yeah, I got an oh yeah, okay. The best cabin on the ship is not an upstairs balcony, it's an inside middle cabin. How much time do you spend in your cabin other than sleeping and showering? They want you to think you're entertaining somebody. You're not. You're sleeping and showering. Get an inside middle cabin, save a lot of money, and if you want to see the ocean, here's the concept: open the door. You get marketed because everybody wants the upgrade, but is the upgrade really worth it, right? And that's the same thing for airlines. Airline seats, have you flown first class on a 737? That's the equivalent of being sent to your room. So why would you pay that money? To be able to say you flew in first class, or to earn bonus miles you still can't redeem? That's a funny one. So you need to do a different definition of terms, because when you do that, everything becomes okay. Allen mentioned that we both worked at the Daily Cardinal in Madison, and that was a country at war. My standard issue was a flak jacket, a helmet, and a gas mask, which I could never get to fit. And every day, there was tear gas on that campus. But I learned covering those stories, things that I've done to this day, right? And it's all about getting people to make their case, right? If the speed limit's 65 miles an hour and you tell me it's 65 miles an hour, the first question I'm going to ask you is, well, first of all, thank you for telling me that, but could you tell me why? And if your answer is, well, it's our policy or it's the law, you haven't made your case. I'm driving 80. But if you tell me, we've done the research and at 66 miles an hour, you're going to die a fiery death, I'm going to say, thank you, I'm driving 50. You all have an individual responsibility here as you plan your travel to get people to make their case. Otherwise, you're just going to be a victim of a brochure where every word ends in the letters ST. Greatest, best, most, finest, loveliest. We all know that's not the case. And then we don't get happy. We come back and we're angry. We have a budget. We don't want to overspend. Which brings me to my next topic, over-tourism. Where does it say in the manual you have to go to Venice in July? You go to Venice in July, the bridge of sighs is the bridge of thighs. You don't need to go to France to get a suntan, go in February. Smaller lines at the Louvre when you can still say it's so small. But the point is, it's time for a contrarian approach to the travel decisions that you make. Go against the grain, right? What's the most magical month of the year? We're in it, September. Everywhere, the best time to go, right? I used to travel the week after, when I was a kid. I used to travel the week after Thanksgiving and the week after New Year's with my parents. You know why? They figured it out. They went to my teachers, got me extra credit assignment, and I skipped out of school, and we went places where there were no lines, it wasn't expensive, and we could have a great experience. We should do that again. Or follow the Mark Twain quote that you would never let school interfere with your education. The point is, we need to have a contrarian view of this, because if we don't, the crowds are out of control. You know what this summer happened in Greece? Every day, in June, July, and August, just last month, 30,000 people a day in 100-degree weather trying to climb up to the Acropolis. That wasn't just an over-tourism issue, that was a medical emergency, right? Who wants to do that? How many people here have taken a cruise? Okay, you've looked at the brochures, you figured out the itinerary you wanted, you forgot to ask a question. The question is this: let's say you pick an itinerary that you like. It's going to go to some of the islands you want to go to. Fair? Okay, all fair. Now you need to call your travel advisor or the cruise line itself and say, listen, on the day we're coming into St. Thomas, how many other cruise ships will be in the harbor that day? If it's more than 2, why would you go? Those ships have exhausted the infrastructure of that destination. It's crazy. Not even enough bathrooms. Why do that to yourself? Some of the cruise ships are getting smarter now. They're staggering their schedules. They're doing something else that's even more smart. They're overnighting, right? Nothing is more ridiculous than getting into a port at 8 in the morning and then racing back at 4 in the afternoon with a t-shirt and a pina colada. That's your souvenir, right? So now they're overnighting, giving you at least an appetizer immersion into that destination, in that culture. These are questions you need to ask before you go anywhere. Otherwise, you're stuck in Sitka, Alaska, with 5 ships in the harbor that dwarf the population 8-to-1. By the way, what's the most dwarfed population when it comes to tourism right now? As a city, or I'll tell you about, as a country. The Vatican. People are outnumbered there 7,000-to-1. And we're not just talking about the Pope. I mean, do the numbers. Why would you do that to yourself? There are times of the year you can go, and there are times of the year you should go. I could even find redemption in Alaska in February and Palm Springs in August, if you do it the right way. The whole idea is not to get trapped on a bus, on a train, in a plane. And if you do get trapped, what are your rights? Do you know? You know, in Europe, they're way ahead of us. There's something in Europe called European Rule 261. And if you're ever traveling in Europe, it also applies to you. It applies to every airline that operates to or from Europe, which includes American, US carriers. And it says this: in the event that your plane is delayed or canceled for reasons due to the airline's responsibility, so we're not talking weather, but we're talking everything else, they have to write you a check on the spot. They have to provide you a hotel, A meal, not a $12 voucher that's good for one photograph of Auntie Anne's pretzels. For those, which are quite delicious, by the way. We don't have that in this country. Back in October of 2024, so about a year ago, the Biden administration DOT proposed a rule that would do just that. What did the Trump administration do last week? They got rid of it, right? There was a lawsuit that the Department of Justice was ready to go to trial on, and they would have won, against 2 airlines for knowingly publishing a flight schedule that they knew, the US airlines, for knowingly publishing a flight schedule that they knew when they published it they could not possibly perform. It was fraud. Trump administration and DOT dropped the case. So without severe financial consequences or those kind of rules, the bad behavior continues. So we're going to see flight delays. We're going to see flight cancellations blamed on weather that didn't exist. We're going to see schedules that are completely unrealistic. I want you, by the way, I failed math in high school. Not once, but twice. But I can do basic arithmetic. Let me suggest this. There's not a runway in the world from Connecticut to Calcutta that can handle more than 23 takeoffs in any given hour, given about 2.5 minutes of separation between takeoffs. That's the rule. So why are the airlines allowed to program and schedule 40 departures at 8 o'clock? Whether it's at LaGuardia or Chicago or Des Moines. They want to be competitive on schedule, but they're not being competitive on realism or your rights. So these days, if I'm traveling, and how appropriate that I'm saying this in a library, I bring 2 books. And I get to finish them because we're sitting on the runway, because it works both ways. If you can't take off, the planes that are landing can't get to the gates, right? Now, by the way, every time any plane that you're on pushes back from the gate, it triggers a signal that goes back to the airline's operation system and the airport that you're going, saying you're on flight 505 or flight 505 is pushed back. It will be landing in Chicago at 11:08. And that's 3 hours later. So there are no surprises. It's not like you just landed, they went, we had no idea. No, they know. There's just no room for you because they can't get the other planes out because of the congestion on the runways. The year is 2025. Can we do some basic math? I mean, this is not a big problem to solve, but somebody has to do it. There's no leadership. There's no leadership, and going back to that FAA dual mandate, there's no incentive. So now that I've made you all feel miserable, the point is, you do have rights, you do have power, it's called your wallet. Look what just happened in the Jimmy Kimmel situation. The reason why Disney caved had nothing to do with free speech. It had to do with people canceling Disney Plus and Hulu. That's what happened. Well, guess what? You get to do the same thing if you're not getting the service for which you contracted. And you have more power than you think you do. You all love to travel. You have passports. You use them. Now we're going to figure out places you can go that are not on your bucket list and how to get there better and have a better experience. So with that, I'm going to ask Allen to come back, wherever Allen may be. Are you here, Allen? Allen? He's there. Oh, he's right over there. Will you want to come up? And then we're going to answer some questions from the audience and hopefully make it a better day. Thank you very much.
So thank you, Peter. That was enlightening. And now we're going to shed some light on the lightning. I have a whole bunch of questions here that I'm going to not probably ask. But
my favorite color is blue.
One of the things, the striking things you said tonight was about Des Moines. What do you have against Des Moines?
Nothing. I just didn't want to go there then. Oh, by the way, ever since that incident, every Tuesday I get an email telling me about all the things I can do in Des Moines because they know I wanted to go.
So That's kind of close to my heart. I lived in the Midwest for 15 years. We lived in the Midwest for part of that time. And there are great places that are untouched in the Midwest. But the question is going to be about, first, just preceding that. I mean, I've been traveling for my whole life, and many of the places are over-traveled. I've taken my kids to Greece 20 times, to really far away places that are no longer far away. They're really at your fingertips. They're crowded. You go to a place like Florence, forget that, or Venice. Any time of the year, you're elbow to elbow. So the question is not where you don't want to go. The question is, what are the places that are still available for travelers that will give you a genuine experience, one, and how do you actually get that genuine experience?
Well, let me tell you what I do wherever I go. I don't talk to tour guides. I don't talk to concierges, although I respect what they do. I talk to the maids. I talk to the maids, and what I want to know from them is, where do you go? Where do you hang out? And in many cases, hey, I'll buy you lunch, let's go. Because you're going to the neighborhoods where the tourists never go. And that's where the real stories are. And that's where the real experiences are. But going back to your original question, there are 193 places in the world on the UN count. It's actually more than that if you add other territories and provinces. And I can argue, and I think I can argue effectively, that there are very, very few that I wouldn't go to for all sorts of reasons. And right now, you mentioned that everything is accessible these days. We have different aircraft types now that have the range to go anywhere, right? When was the day, we all remember the days of refueling stops. Those are gone. We're now flying over places. Now we have to get more specific and fly to the ones that were the flyovers, right? Des Moines, by the way, and my column used to run in the Des Moines Register, so I'll have you know that. But the thing is, everything has a great thing to offer if you start at the bottom with the people who live there and work there and who are not entrusted with promoting the destination. Because I don't want to be a victim of a brochure.
Well, I'm glad you said that, because our mode of transportation for years was not to use a lot of money. Not because we weren't able to use a lot of money.
You were cheap.
In addition to being cheap and poor and out of money, we found that we had the most genuine experiences when we met people from the bottom up versus from the top down. A couple of examples. We used to take the kids to Greece every summer. As I mentioned before, it was a specific island. They actually got to know the island, got to know the people, got to know the places, just became overwhelmed. This was a place in the 70s when I first started traveling. They couldn't even get a boat into, yet an airline. Now they have tourist boats, they have a major port, they have a major airport, and it's impossible to go. So I thought, okay, let's find something in the Far East, the equivalent of what these islands were, but now. So maybe 10, 15 years ago, we found a place called Koh Samui. And
I know it very well.
And right after that, the White Lotus found Koh Samui, and started to film their program there, and that became off the charts.
But let me give you an example of what you're talking about, having those conversations. This is a true story. It happened to me in New York about almost 25 years ago. I was coming out of a hotel in New York. It was a Friday afternoon. It was 4 o'clock in the afternoon. I was really late to try to get a 6 o'clock flight from Kennedy. Good luck. And there was a cab ready for, they had cabs riding up there trying to get the airport ride. I flagged him, he came over. I got in the cab, and being the arrogant New Yorker that I am, I said, listen, here's what I want you to do. Go up Madison Avenue, turn right on 96th Street, go out on the FDR Drive, bat out of hell on the Grand Central. He goes, what time your flight? I said, my flight's at 6 o'clock. He said, I tell you what, I get you there in 19 minutes or ride is free. I said, really? Okay, you're on. I'm born and raised in New York. This guy took me under alleyways and around curves and under tunnels I had never even seen. And 18 minutes later, he's pulling up at Terminal 8 at Kennedy for American. And he said, so what do you think? I said, what do I think? What's your name? William. William what? William Magala. Where are you from? Alexandria, Egypt. I said, is this your medallion? He said, yeah. I said, how would you like to be my driver from now on? He said, deal. He gave me a cell phone, and for the next 4 years, every time I came to New York, he'd be waiting for me. He drove all the other guys at NBC. I turned him on to them. My mother didn't like the shirts he wore. She bought him shirts. And then one day, and this completes the circle, he said to me, you know my cousin Billy who sometimes drives when I can't? I said, yeah, he's getting married in July. This is in March. He's getting married in July, and we'd like you to come to the wedding. And I said, you know what? Okay, July 26th, I'm there. I sort of forgot about it. And now it's the end of May, early June. I'm in the cab. He says, well, you're coming, right? I said, oh, yeah, right, July 26th. Great, I'll be there. The wedding was in Alexandria, Egypt. I went. It was an Egyptian Coptic wedding on the shores of the Mediterranean in King Farouk's palace. In New York, he was a cab driver. In Egypt, he was a king. I was the only guy there in the wedding not going, but I adopted a new family, right? Every time I land in Egypt now, they're waiting for me. I see Egypt in a completely different way. And it all started because of a conversation with a cab driver in New York from Alexandria in Egypt. And yes, and I encourage you all, if they're not being rude or on the phone, talk to the people who are providing you the services. It's amazing what that leads to.
That's a great explanation and answer. So let's switch gears right now. When we started traveling, there was a little concern about Americans traveling abroad. And a lot of Americans wore Canadian flags. Do you remember that period? So, and then that changed, and for the last 30 or 40 years, that has not been a problem. Has it become a problem now with the political situation that we're facing?
The overwhelming answer for you is no, it's not a problem, because wherever I go in the world, they love Americans. They just can't understand our government. And so I'm put in the awkward position of trying to explain it. But no, they love America. I'll give you one more story to give you an idea about that. This goes back to Egypt again. When Sadat was president, I was with his driver going through the Sinai on a story with a photographer from National Geographic who had the attention span of a flea. And we're going through miles and miles of sand, followed by miles and miles of sand. We had a 5-hour ride to go all the way from Cairo to Aqaba. And so we're in the car, and it's nothing going on. And my photographer friend, and by the way, the driver was a military driver who spoke no English. And all of a sudden, 2.5 hours into the ride, my impatient photographer friend does this. Na, 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 na. The car screeches to a halt. Dust is coming through the windows. We're choking. And the guy turns around to me and goes, na, 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 na. And he looked at me and said, book him, Dano. American culture, as bad as that is still prevalent, and it's still a common ground opening window to a conversation.
I want to agree with you in terms of my own experience. The last few years I've been traveling for the Fulbright Foundation, most recently in Uzbekistan with basically 100% Muslim population. They have been the sweetest. They have been the most interested in the United States and the most interested in coming here to continue their education. And it would really be unfortunate if that changes, because
it already has changed.
That's right, because we have actually have great relations with people because of how they know our culture.
You may not know this, but the Trump administration 3 weeks ago instituted a $250 visa fee if they were going to grant you the visa. And then they went one step beyond that and said, if they granted you the visa for that $250 fee, you had to put up to a $15,000 bond to come to America. Who can afford that?
So right? let me ask you one of the questions I actually wrote down.
Okay.
So what's one travel story you wanted to report but couldn't due to political, safety, or ethical reasons? What ethical guidelines guide your reporting on cultures, disasters, or sensitive regions?
When I was at Newsweek, I got a phone call one day from one of the pilots at United Airlines, a guy named Don McBain. And then he said, listen, I want to have lunch with you. There's something I need to tell you. So, and he was a big 747 pilot. And so we went to have lunch, and he brought a friend of his named Sidney Hill, who then flew a senior pilot for Western Airlines, and they brought another guy from TWA. So 3 competing airline pilots who were friends, And why did they want to have lunch with me? To tell me about how dangerous the airport was in San Diego, California. It had the steepest approach of any airport in America, still does. It was very badly designed, even though it's a convenient airport for the city. And they thought it was an accident waiting to happen. I needed to see for myself. So they also are private pilots. We went to the Torrance Airport, got in their plane. I went down with them, we shot the approach. Sure enough, the Lindbergh Field, they weren't kidding. There was so much private traffic in the air. I mean, you just had to, it was like bees in heat and nobody controlling them. I came back and I said, will you guys be willing to go on the record with your airline affiliation and say you would never fly to San Diego until they fixed it? And they said yes. So I went to Newsweek and I said, guys, we got to do this. America's accident waiting to happen. These are the senior airline pilots who won't fly there. These are the statistics that prove it. I sent the suggestion into New York. I know when I sent it in 1977. I got an answer back 3 hours later saying, great suggestion on the airport in San Diego, but the editors here would rather wait until there's a crash. Wait. September 25th, 1978, I had left Newsweek. I was back in New York. My phone rang at 11 o'clock, or actually at noon. And that was the day they had the crash at San Diego. And you know how Newsweek reported that story? They said, the problems at Lindbergh Field have long been known. Yeah, no kidding. By the way, the problems are still there.
Okay, so let's follow up on airports. One of the things I do in my professional work is to look at infrastructure. And it's obvious from all of us who have traveled, we've traveled to wonderful airports all over the world with great infrastructure.
Those are the airports in Asia, go ahead.
And in Europe, where you can get off a plane onto some fast train and get into town in minutes. Why don't, in general, we have that here, and how could this be solved?
Well, you heard what I said about hotels. The same applies to airports. The people who design airports have never flown. How many people have flown out of LaGuardia? Okay, we all remember the old LaGuardia that Joe Biden called a third world airport, right? Which was an insult to a lot of third world airports. Well, now they built a new LaGuardia. It's bright, it's gleaming, it's shining, it's still congested, and the people who designed it not with you in mind. They designed it with the retailers in mind.
Actually, I rail about the new LaGuardia all the time. The old LaGuardia, which was a trash heap, was at least easy to get from the counter to your plane.
Oh, yes. Because
now it's 10 times harder to get to your plane.
Yeah, first of all, the carpeting they put in, it's the Baton Death March, right? And if you have a rollerboard, it's not helping, right? They have no people movers. Why? They don't want you to bypass the retailers. I don't go to the airport to shop. I don't go to the airport to eat. I don't go to the airport for fine dining. I don't want to go to the airport. I just want to go through it. And so do you. And the problem is the way their financial model is set up now, they have to have retail income, and therefore they design airports for them and not for us.
And there's no connection from LaGuardia to anywhere. So let's take some questions from the audience. Somebody running that for us?
Please come up here and ask your questions.
Do you have an ID on this person?
I'm a local 9th grader, Siddhant Kumar. What is your favorite airline?
What are the greatest airlines?
No, favorite.
Oh, my favorite airlines. Here's how I define a favorite airline. I don't have a favorite airline. I have favorite airlines on individual routes, right? So if you say to me, what's your favorite airline between A and B, I can tell you. Because if I just said you I had a great favorite airline, but I was on a flight to Cleveland and that plane is late 96% of the time, it can't be my favorite airline. So every airline has dogs. Every airline has planes that just never show up, right? And sometimes it's so bad. We had a situation that happened at Delta Airlines at JFK where they had a flight every night from JFK to Accra in Ghana. And the 767 they used was in such bad shape that for a period of 10 days, it would push back from the gate and come back to the gate. Or it would never push back from the gate. Or it would push back from the gate and taxi and come back to the gate. Or it would actually take off, have to dump fuel, and come back to the gate. And it got so crazy, I've never heard of this in the past, but I love this story. The government, the legislature of Ghana, passed a law banning that one plane from Ghana. That can't be my favorite airline, but on the route, you see my point. So I can only do it by route.
Peter, thank you very much. Can you tell us the 5 countries you wouldn't visit?
Sure, but let me give you the metric for that first. I won't go anywhere where I don't know who's in control. It's as simple as that. So would I go to North Korea tomorrow? Yes, I've been twice. Would I go to Iran? Yes. Would I go to parts of Chechnya? No. Up until recently, would I go to Syria? No. Would I go to Camden, New Jersey? But I'm running out, because the bottom line is, if you know who's in control and you play by their rules, you can go anywhere, and I do. Haiti right now is a no, only because there's no one in control, unless you call the gangs in control, but there's no one. If there's only one gang in control, I'd probably find the leader and figure it out. But there are 25 gangs in control. It's warlord central. It's sad. It's a sad story. Haiti has always been a sad story, and the answer right now would be no.
Somalia?
Now, yes. Really? Yeah, really. Russia is a no right now because I'd be a target. I'd be someone they'd want to exchange.
What about other than yourself, though, going to Russia?
What do you mean?
Well, you said you wouldn't go because you'd be a target. What about other people?
Well, other than VFR traffic, otherwise known as visiting friends and relatives, I don't recommend it. Right now, no. And by the way, all the carriers that used to go there, including cruise ships, have pulled out because they can't get insurance. So right now, it's a no-go. Yes.
Frank Wood, a Wiseman. I've traveled and lived in 43 countries, including Nigeria and Pakistan for 5 years. But a positive question. Sully Sullenberger landing on the Hudson River and everyone getting out on the wings. I'm sure that was studied afterwards. They must have done a lot of things right to get so successfully out on the wings in time, right?
Interestingly enough, that was my story that I won the Emmy for. I worked with Sully for many, many years after that, and of course his co-pilot, Jeff Skiles. What was interesting about that is I went into the simulators and we recreated all the elements that were part of that flight to determine whether or not the plane was actually flyable or whether he had any other choice. And what we determined, talk about amazing planets aligning, was that on that particular day in 2009, if the birds had hit him a minute earlier, he never would have made the George Washington Bridge to be able to turn around. If the birds had hit him a minute later, he never would have made it turn around to get back to the river. If it had happened on that particular day an hour earlier, it was 0 visibility on the Hudson. And an hour later, as we all experienced, even the people in the water, the river had totally iced up. What really saved them was not just his training as a jet pilot, it was his training in his early career as a glider pilot. He knew exactly what the performance stats were on that plane, and on that particular afternoon, there were no boats in the middle of the river. And where did he park the plane? About 800 feet from the circle line. And now, here's the most amazing thing about that. You had all those people on the wings. You also had people in the water that slipped off the wings. How long did the rescue take from the time he hit the water till everybody was ashore? 24 minutes. Unbelievable. Never to be repeated again. An amazing story.
Okay, before we take the next question from the audience, after decades of global reporting, what's the most transformative travel experience that reshaped your worldview and possibly your life?
Taking the 6 train. No, I'm kidding.
LaGuardia Airport?
Yeah, right. I don't think there's one. The thing is, there are 193 countries I've been to, about 152. There are 44 I haven't been to and may never get to. It's not a race. I'm not ticking off a box. But the point is, at the end of the day, every trip is transformative if you have those conversations. Every trip is transformative because you seek what? Common ground. You seek understanding. And I'm not going to sit up here and start kumbaya. What I am going to say is, it's amazing the transformative power of travel in itself, to break down barriers, to open up borders. And by the way, it was travel and tourism that opened up China. It will be travel and tourism that's going to open up North Korea within the next 2.5 years. Mark my words. Think about it. What does North Korea produce that the world consumes? Nothing. unless you're in the market for unreliable Scud missiles. What's going to save his economy? There's only one thing: travel and tourism. What did he just open up 3 weeks ago? A beach resort. Originally opened just for the North Koreans and the Russians, but that's not going to be sustainable economically. He's got secret deals right now with the Spanish, the Swiss, and the Germans to build this travel infrastructure. And when that happens, guess what? He won't be launching missiles. He'll be able to feed his people.
Okay, let's take one last question from the audience.
Hi, we greatly enjoyed your talk. My question is, do you have an opinion on the Amex Platinum travel insurance?
How much time do we have? Oh my goodness. Here's the problem. How many people here, I'm going to get to your answer in a second, but I got to ask a question first. How many people here have either travel medical insurance or medical repatriation and evacuation insurance? Okay. There are a couple of companies that do a great job. MedJet Assist, Berkshire Hathaway do a good job. Travel Guard, those are three. Here's the problem. Let me explain what it is first so I can help you. What medical evacuation and repatriation insurance is, and you should all have it if you travel, is that if you get sick or injured anywhere overseas, your own insurance is not going to cover you. This kicks in, and in the best written policies, what happens is they determine where you are, they get you medically stabilized there, then they consult your own personal physician. After all, who knows your medical history better than your own doctor? And then in consultation with your doctor, they will, if necessary, fly a medically equipped jet and fly you back to the medical facility and doctor of your choice. Most of the credit card coverage that is offered, like by American Express or MasterCard or Visa, if you read the fine print, not all of them, but many of them will fly you to the medical facility and doctor of their choice. And now you become the victim of the lowest bidder. You need to read the policy language carefully, whether it's American Express or any of those credit card coverage, to make sure it's giving you what you need. And the same thing applies, by the way, to all the companies that tell you if you rent a car using their card, you don't have to buy the rental car insurance. What many of these companies don't tell you, it's not primary insurance. It's secondary insurance, and it only kicks in if you exhaust the policy limits of your primary insurance, and if you don't have the primary insurance, you don't have any insurance.
So we'll take one last question, but...
Thank you.
I hope that was helpful.
But before that question on rental cars, so I was denied a rental car because of my age, even though I had rented and paid for it. Have you had that experience?
Yeah.
Okay, enough. Last question.
Thank you.
But you can get around it. By the way, on the insurance we're talking about, including rental car stuff, even though they have exclusions, there is a sliding scale of premiums and policies that will still cover you, even if you're over either 65 or 75. Yes, sir.
I believe you said we should not make airline reservations online. How should we make them?
Okay, here's what you do. You should research online, get as many options as you think you need, knowing full well that you're not looking at the whole inventory. How many people here know about secret flights? Anybody? They're a secret. Okay. I'm going to clue you in, because you're not going to find them online. A secret flight is called a Fifth Freedom Flight. It's a bilateral agreement between countries that allows an airline not based in country A to fly from a city in that country to another country and another city where they're not based, right? So if I want to go tonight from New York to Milan, what airline do I take? Emirates. They're not based in either. How does that happen? It flies from New York to Milan and continues on to Dubai, but they're allowed to take traffic. Frankfurt to New York, here's a great one. Singapore Airlines. Nobody knows, right? So that's the stuff you're not going to see online a lot. You will find that out if you call a travel advisor or a travel agent or the airline itself, because what they're seeing on their screen is not what you're seeing on your screen. It gives you an opportunity to be a good comparison shopper and then make a decision.
For domestic flights?
Oh, same thing. Absolutely. There are flights, look, there are positioning flights that you don't know about, right? There's a flight every day. Well, there used to be one on TWA that went from St. Louis to LaGuardia at midnight. Who's flying that plane? Well, if you're having a dinner in St. Louis, you don't want to get up early in the morning, you fly the plane. Was it listed? No. It's a positioning flight because they wanted to fly to New York for maintenance. overnight maintenance, right? So, and the other key that I'll tell you about, and we make this mistake all the time, but knowing the schedules helps you. You've all heard the advice, get the first flight of the day if you want to avoid delays. And that's generally true. I'll go one step beyond that. Take the first flight of the day from an airport where the airline that you want to fly is not based. So if I want to go from Dallas to New York, right? Well, American is based there. How do I know they're going to be on time? If I want to take a Delta flight from Dallas, and it's a 6 a.m. flight in the morning, that means that plane came in the night before. It overnighted in Dallas. The crew stayed with the plane. They joined the plane the next day, and you're out while everybody's waiting for American to wake up.
Let's have the organizer of this event, Art Mann, actually ask the final
question. Well, first of all, Peter, thank you very much. This has been a wonderful evening. Thank you very much again.
Thank you.
And then following up on the question I started with you when we were meeting earlier, I mean, I follow you online. I mean, while I'm sitting here, I get an Eye on Travel newsletter from you. How do you go to all these places? How do you keep doing this week after week, traveling to so many destinations?
Well, here's what I do. First of all, for those of you who don't know, in addition to what I do for CBS, I host and produce 4 other shows that are on the air right now. One is called, you saw it, The Royal Tour with Heads of State. One is called Hidden. One is called The Travel Detective, and then there's the radio show. I literally travel 300 days a year. My wife is the most incredible soldier and partner in the world because she goes with me. She's here tonight because she travels with me every day. Yeah, please. And remember, I'm not on vacation. When I was at Newsweek, the most number of days I could devote on a story, we were weekly, was 3. That same principle applies to how I do my stories now. So for example, I was in broadcasting in Cooperstown, New York on Monday. I'm here tonight. Tomorrow I'm in Rome. 4 days later, I'm in Sicily. 4 days after that, I'm in Bulgaria and Romania. 4 days after that, I'm in Manchester. 4 days after that, I'm in LA. And 4 days after that, I'm in Tahiti, and I'm only 19. But it's something, what was that? Are you a spy? You know, it would be the greatest cover, wouldn't it? A guy who's a spy because I got the greatest cover. I'm a travel person. No, but that's how I've always done it. You get into a rhythm. And also, remember, you have to understand why you're going there. You're not going there to get a suntan. You're not going there to lie on the beach. Everybody wants my job until they tell them my schedule. So I'm actually working, right? And so that's how I do it. Now, I've been lucky. When I was in school with Allen, I only slept 4 hours a night, a different 4 hours, which is why I missed all my classes. But now I sleep between basically midnight and 4 a.m. because with all the projects I'm doing around the world, it's already 9 o'clock in the morning somewhere in the world and I gotta get on the phone. So you get into a rhythm, you get into a discipline, and that's how you do it.
So I'm getting a suntan from these lights, so I think we should thank Peter, and thanks for coming out tonight.